Hi, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. Tonight's show is 116. That's right, we've done 115 shows up until now, and this is our 116th. I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. Thanks to you, the TNT Show and India Live are growing and delivering more exciting shows than ever before. I mean, for example, you can watch this show on IndyLive.net, which is streamed out to YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. Plus, if you go to YouTube, you can see all the previous 115 shows. Now, you have a chance to support this vital channel. Please donate whatever you can to the crowdfunder. You'll see the details on the screen later. Early feedback suggests that many of you are more than a little upset by the media coverage of recent events where some argue that journalism was junked in favor of sycophancy. Well, if you're looking for that alternative voice, we are part of that. You've found it, in fact. We're here for you. But the question is, will you be here for us? Please donate whatever you can afford to keep this channel producing shows like this and many others. You know, it's been another great day for British democracy. Liz Truss is presently in New York, where she's pushing the trickle-down economics theory, a theory which President Joe Biden says just does not work, and he wants to see the back of it, and he wants to hear no more of it. So you might think she's got quite a challenge on her hands to convince him that this is her preferred option. It seems also that the much trumpeted US-UK trade deal is a dead duck. Well, President Biden makes it very clear he'll oppose any damage to the international treaties affecting Northern Ireland. Well, tonight we are talking to a special guest. We'll be discussing the new not-for-profit citizen journalism publication, Bylines Scotland. Its aim is to publish well-written, fact-based articles and opinion pieces on subjects that are of interest to people in Scotland and beyond. We'll be talking to Bylines Scotland's editor-in-chief, Ian Kinsey, and we'll be talking about journalism, Scotland, the economy, and so much else besides. He is here for a full hour, and he'll be taking your questions live. So there's still time to get your question considered. You'll see the details on the screen. TNT, of course, stands for The Nation Talks. So in many respects, this is your show. We're live and we're free. So no license, no problem. Now, to our guest tonight. Tonight, The Nation Talks to Ian Kinsey. Thanks so much for joining us, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing fine, John. Thanks very much for having me. And, greetings from beautiful downtown Dundee. So anyway, which I believe our first minister called the Yes City. And because of, on the last referendum, it went very heavy here, yes. And
yeah.
And also parts, Glasgow and what have you. So that's what carried. But anyway, it's a wonderful evening. And I'm doing very, very well. The publication's doing very well. Had a great start.
Great. Tell us all about it. Tell us how the parent company began, the parent organization, and what led to Bylines Scotland and your part in it, Ian.
Well, Bylines, it's now, there's 8 bylines throughout England, and they needed to establish themselves before they moved on. I wrote for Yorkshire Bylines, and Louise Houghton, who is the editor-in-chief, and she's a direct co-director of the Bylines Network. That's how it all began. The big success is Yorkshire, and it expanded out from there to central, to East Anglia, and over to northwest and northeast of England. And it's so it's been very, very successful. It's growing, but as with any organization, with anything before they expand, it's very, very careful. And so I had talked about, since living in Dundee, and there's a number of writers from Scotland who are writing for different bylines down there. And so let's start, the probe. Do we have the audience here? And we have we have the same population here as Yorkshire has. So I'm familiar with working with that population and what have you. So yes, so we took the gamble. And one thing I will say is that when I was talking about, yes, I'll go, but um, Scotland is different. Scotland is not England. It's not Yorkshire. It's not Central. It's not whatever. Right? Even in the northeast, northwest. But so here in Scotland, there's a different attitude towards the media than down in England. Up here, we have, as you know, we have Bylines, or we have BBC Scotland. We have all the other IT STV, which is ITV, and if you look at some of the major media corporations up here, they're all run by foreign interests. It's natural. Like the trickle down Liz Truss trickle down effect goes right into corporations as well. But there's good media up here, and there's a lot of citizen journalism, and that's been the big thing. And I think the big surge in citizen journalism began, I think, after 2016. To me, when they saw what was happening in the States, they had already had 5 years or 6 years of that time of conservative governments here. And I think that when that whole thing, when Brexit happened, when the threat of what was going to happen in Scotland, the Northern Ireland situation, all that, and the economy, and I think that the lies by politicians over Brexit. I can't say want to buy a bus, but anyway, we're looking at a change, and I think that's when there were some very good publications prior to that who are trying to get their message across. But I think now people are looking for the alternatives. And you're the alternative. We're the alternative. There's a lot of good alternatives out there. And people have to go look for them. And people have to find them. People have to. I think you're getting the story from the people on. You're not having a reporter come to you. You're getting people who are living the idea, are living the situation of what they want, that what they care about, down that kernel of the community. And when we started Bylines Scotland, one of the things we did do was make sure that it was written by people who lived here, and or people who were Scots overseas, or had a very good tie to Scotland. I've got a writer in Italy. I've got a writer in Germany. I've got writers. Yes, I have writers in England, and I have a writer in Canada. So it's and I have an American writing for, and I have who lives here. I have Scots. I have Saudis, not Saudis, pardon me, an Iraqi gentleman, and it's diverse, but they live here and they're writing about here. And we have people who writing for us, because there was beginning they were saying, are you indie, or are you unionist, or what are you? We are everything. We are everything. You don't restrict your show to just people who believe in independence. You've offered, please come on board if you have an alternative view, and that's what we have too. We have writers who believe in vehemently in independence. We have writers who are in the middle of the road, picket fence is starting to hurt on the bum, and and people who think that we need to have a stronger union. We need to have better rights for Scotland. Scotland needs to have more, like take over, and enjoy some of the taxes that we send back down to Westminster. Maybe we need to change that so we know we keep it here right at the beginning instead of having it come back. But also our resources. We need control of that. We need better control of that. And basically, what happens down in Westminster and number 10 should be defense, if we stay in the union, defense and monetary. The rest should be devolved to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and yes, we believe that there should be a referendum. Whether you for what side you're on. Let's get this issue sorted. Let's get it sorted before 2024, and have the proper question, not like Rees Mogg's question on imperial measurements. I mean, that is an insult. That's an insult, and you can't have that kind of question. I've been involved in referendums before with Quebec. I lived in Canada for a number of years, and in case anybody's wondering, I'm from Salford, so so it's I left there because I wanted to see blue sky and what have you. So anyway, I was there during the heavy industrial area. It's so improved now. When I left, it was a shipping canal, so that gives you an idea. So anyway, but Canada has that sort of great confederation with the provinces. But when Quebec had its referendum in 1999, it was so close. It was like 0.2% said to remain. And that's how close it was. But the difference is, I remember David Cameron walking out of number 10, going to the lectern, and I don't know why they need a lectern, but anyway, just stands there and start talking. What he said there, what sounded really good. We're going to listen to this. We're going to listen to Wales. We're going to listen to Scotland. The people of Scotland have sent us a message, and I understand that that was probably, maybe he meant it at that time, but none of that happened. But what you have now, like in Quebec, Jean Chrétien, who was the prime minister at the time, delivered on everything he said. Quebec now is a distinct society. Scotland is a distinct society. And this is what we need to have an understanding. We need to have this open dialogue, and we need to have, and that's what we're doing here in Bylines Scotland, is an open dialogue. And we need to hear from people. We had some great articles so far, and as you complimented, and I really appreciate that. But we have a voice, and these are from people. All these articles are written by people who are experiencing it, who are experiencing working at low wage, people who are experiencing in the shipbuilding industry, and also we have people in the universities who he's written a great article on whether Boris is the best prime minister, the worst prime minister we ever had, but it was broken down even using Hacker from the prime minister days. But we talk about the good about Scotland, the beauty of it, the artistic part of it, and everything else. But we also talk about the dark side. We talk about the Tinkler experiment and up in around the Pechlachry area, and we talk about the internment camp. Well, this is on the Isle of Man, but we rounded up Italians. Lady wrote about her grandfather. We've had a Holocaust family who lives here, and we also talk about things that need to be done. But we also celebrate like what Glasgow's doing, talking about its new business plans and the new rapid transit, so on the new transit system. And I think it's really good to see progress, but you also have to look at what you need now, and there's a lot of deprivation here. We also have, and we vie with Dundee and Glasgow, go head to head on the drug death capital of Europe, if not the world. And okay, I'm going to go back to Canada for a minute, so I'll wait the Maple Leaf for a second, but I will say that I was in Vancouver when we talked about what they call the downtown east side, the drug deaths down there, and that's where they started safe injection sites.
Yeah.
And so all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada to keep this thing in operation. And once it was approved, it finally got approved when a conservative government in British Columbia, the minister said there, we have a health crisis, no longer a criminal code crisis. We have a health crisis,
Yeah.
and that's when they made it legal. And now there's something like 40 across Canada, and they're growing. And what it is, it's a safe injection site with medical people there. You stay there after they test your drugs, they do everything else, and they also help you and your family in like if you have issues. But these are the things that Scotland needs, and Scotland can take the lead. But we can't do that because that's run by the Home Office.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. And I appreciate that. But I would love to see the health minister up here say, we have a health crisis and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Do you think perhaps some people reckon that the Scottish government is a little bit too conservative with a small c, i.e. it always wishes to be legal, i.e. because there's an argument that says, well, you know something, the fact that it's not permitted doesn't mean you ought not to do it. If helping people in drug centres, the way you describe, is effective, why don't you just take it upon yourself to do it? Now, the counter argument, of course, is, well, it's illegal, and therefore they could be closed down just as quickly as they're opened up. But it always seems to some people that there's a tendency always to be not pushing the envelope in a way that, if you watch the way other countries function, if they feel that their populace is being injured, then they take action. They don't say, oh, well, somebody in Westminster says it's not okay, therefore we mustn't do it. I mean, it all sounds, to some people's ears, it sounds a bit wet to say, well, I can't do it because somebody in Westminster won't allow it.
But does that not go back to our queuing? We're so nice in line. We line up. We do everything else. If Westminster tomorrow change the law on something, we do it. And that's when you look at places throughout Europe, you've had mass people in the streets over something. But look at I'm going to take Portugal for a second. Drugs are illegal. They were the worst. They were worse than we were, and it got to be people were just dying in the streets. So they made the drugs illegal.
Yeah. Well, at one time, the Portuguese people rose up in an act of defiance against the fascist government, which was completely illegal.
Yeah.
So you could argue that nothing much happens if you stick to the rule book.
We do. Well, those are the rules. And somebody said there was an old thing that well, you can protest now. Well, I don't want to protest. Well, no, you have to because that's a rule. Well, I'm protesting against rules. But it's sort of like that catch-22 argument.
Yeah.
But you need, there's a lot of angry people up there, and also a lot of good arguments. There's a lot of excellent ideas, but you've got to bring all that together.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a Martin Luther King. Maybe you need somebody Nelson Mandela to stand up and to lead the masses, and so to speak, and take them to Valhalla. But I just think that we're sometimes a puppy dog society.
There's a bit of that. There's a sort of I'm working class. My father was a bus conductor, and my mother was a clippy. But the reality is that my schooling was based on compliance. It was education with compliance, i.e. sit up, shut up, you're here to learn. And I think that sticks with you for a long time. And maybe it pervades to some degree the whole of society, which becomes conformist. When I look back at the Scottish Enlightenment, for example, there weren't too many conformists there.
No.
They were always kicking over the traces and upsetting people.
But you need to poke. You need to stoke the fire.
Yeah.
And this is it. And going back to what you were saying, that perhaps the Scottish government is a small C. Could it be that they've been in power for so long? And they also looked at what happened in Catalonia.
Yeah, I mean,
like, I
well,
don't think it would be a good idea.
you've heard the old adage a number of times, which is that politicians need to be changed as often as nappies, and for much the same reason. I want to take a few questions, if we may, Ian. Bill Holland is asking, is the new internet security bill at Westminster designed to strangle independent media sources?
In a hidden way, yes. And I think sometimes the mainstream media already is very timid at times. You get the odd good journalist questioning people, questioning the politicians and challenging them. I'll give a shout out to Beth Rigby. I think she does a fine job. But as an example, but at the same time, you get these. They're probing, but you don't have it like you had back in the '70s, especially in the '70s, and perhaps into the '80s. But during that whole time of the '70s, of I guess you would call it investigative journalism. There's none of that anymore that I can see. I really am looking for that, and that's what we are an outlet, but we investigative journalism. We haven't got that far yet. Us, okay? I haven't found a barracuda yet, so to speak, and I'd love to find one, but that stays within just skims.
Yeah.
The knows not what to do. But we've also got a situation where you get politicians now here are looking at what is written about them on Twitter and turning around and saying and getting a very strong law firm down in London and say, we want to sue you. And that has happened. And they start, okay, and you just may have retweeted the tweet.
Yeah.
But that goes out. And then, so I want 2,500 from you. I want 10,000 from you. I want who you are. And so you look at the legal fees of challenging this thing that may be 5, 6 times more than that, or maybe 10 times more than that. And your insurance company says, hey, pay up. And you're getting now politicians, I think, here who are saying, let's write the rules, but, and I don't think politicians should be writing rules on freedom of speech or press or anything. And because right now, I look at what these bills. Why are these bills there? Why do we need a policing bill? We have police who are. We have the rights under the law. When they read you, tell you when you're under caution and what have you like that. Why do we need these extra bills? Why do we need this media bill? Why do we need bills to have this, that, and the other? It's eventually, to me, it seems like it's the beginning of a stranglehold.
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree with you there. Charles Smith is asking a somewhat similar question. He's saying, Ian, you've worked around the UK. Do you see a way out of the influence of overseas money influencing domestic politics?
I hate to mention legislation, but I think you need to have caps on campaigning. I mean, strong caps. I mean, so that people who don't have a lot of money can campaign, can go after an office and whatnot. But overseas money influencing domestic politics, it's all the time. I don't like, what I really, really bothers me is when I see a politician, whomever, I won't name any names here, it's just that they will then go on a board of directors or else become an advisor to a Commonwealth country. They're making extra money, or as I said, they're on boards here. They're also lobbying, and you just know You're a politician. You're paid a good wage, and just to be an MP, and then you're on these different committees and you get a little bit more. But I think you're there to serve the people. You're not there to serve yourself, and you're not there for, oh, I'm going to be on a board if I'm an MP, or I'm going to be an influencer. No, you have to be a member of parliament for your constituency. Nothing else. You don't have another job, and that should be totally illegal. And the money coming in, everything that's coming in from overseas, even domestic, every dime or every coin, every pence has to be counted, and that's it. And you have to get trust back in politics. And
Ian, I mean, that makes sense, but don't you also feel that the remedies available to people when they to the courts when people are found to have breached these regulations or rules ought to be stringent? Because what seems to happen just now is that people say, "Oh, mea culpa, I didn't quite understand what you meant by not taking this money. Anyway, it's done and dusted. The Prime Minister thinks it's okay, and I shall continue in office."
Yeah,
That's what happens right now.
Yeah, it always happens, of course, and that is, that's when you need people rebelling like mad. We have recall if a person breaks a law, and anything that's when the rallying cry in that constituency should be, this person broke the law. We have the mechanism to remove him, to force a by-election or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's maybe complicated, but we need to get, and also you need people you need better voices in Parliament.
Yeah.
You need these voices yelling back and forth. When you look at the contrast between Holyrood, the Welsh Parliament, and Westminster. Westminster, it's embarrassing to watch that. I mean, these are grown people, and and adults, and you put them in that position. And I realize that it's become something like over the years, going centuries back, the waving the paper in the air. But I think that you need to bring back some civility back. But this is where you need a strong speaker. You need strong leaders on both sides to say, okay, we're going to stop this stuff. But the influence is if you break the law of any kind, you're finished. You're out.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't part of the problem?
Broke the trust.
Isn't part of the problem the fact that makes so much sense? Isn't part of the problem that we've got a whole bunch of people there who effectively are fireproof, i.e., because of the first past the post system, it really doesn't matter what they do, and it doesn't matter whom they do it to, as long as the Prime Minister sanctions the behaviour, they can continue. And it seems to me that the root, or at least one of the roots of this problem, is the fact that there isn't a proportional system for Westminster. So none of these people are on tenterhooks. They know that if they get a safe seat, and most of the seats are safe, then they're there. It's like, it's money for old rope. All they have to do is obey the whip, and everything will be smooth, and they'll get their directorships and all the rest of it. It seems to me you do need to keep politicians on tenterhooks.
Well, let me put it this way: if the United Kingdom were a corporation, and these were our employees sitting there, people representing different departments, and they broke the rules and regulations of the company, you'd be out on your butt, or else you'd be out like 1, 2, 3, verbal warning, written warning, third time you're gone, and that is. These are people employed. They have a job, and the way they're behaving, they're violating the trust of that job by going off and doing something else. Because if I work for a company and suddenly I'm working for another company, that and having a double income, and it's affecting my job, then I'd be out on my butt. I don't. We give these people a gravy train, a trough to feed off of,
Yeah.
and that's but we allow it to happen. I mean, we have to rise, I guess, ourselves.
But Ian, isn't such a interrupt? Isn't the flaw in your argument about comparing a company to politics is the fact that the chief executive of a company is beholden to shareholders and customers and doesn't want to do anything that impacts adversely on these groups. But the reality is, once you're sitting on an 80-seat majority, as is presently the case, you don't have to care for any of that stuff. You really don't have to care. You can say, well, say my customers are upset, the voters are upset. Who cares? Because I'm here for the foreseeable future. When I retire, I will be well looked after by corporate interests and elsewhere. Isn't that where the parallel with a company falls, in fact?
Well, going back to my business analogy again, we put them in there for 5 years, and sort of like they're gone. We never see them again until then they come back and they're our friend again. They want to shake our hand because they want our vote, and they tell us it's like any sort of review. You do really good in the last 6 months prior to that.
Yeah.
But what you do is maybe we should do something a little radical ourselves and have them on an annual review.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was talking about the proportional system.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody's elected by a handful of votes, I suspect they're more sensitive than somebody who has a majority of 25,000.
Yes, but you hear they're talking about first past the post. They're talking all through their campaign to get to look at STV, the vote. We got it up here. Nobody's saying, hey, look at Scotland. Scotland's got this system of how many? We 4 or 5 different voting ways we have. We have to do first past the post in the general election, and but we also have the proportional representation, the STV vote, and then we have the other one that brings up the different, breaks down when you have so many constituency. There are 70 odd constituency. The other 56, they end up, you may not get on there because you won that seat by a vast majority. What you end up with in Holyrood is a good proportion of what the country voted for.
Yeah.
The voices. And that is commendable, because to come up with that kind of a system is, somebody asked me to explain it. I say, just put it, just go to the ballot box, just write down 1, 2, 3, 4, and it works. Believe me, it works. But if they had that down south on the other side of the wall, it would be a disaster for the Tories. It would hurt, but you would also see more Greens there.
Yeah.
You'd also see other parties there that are struggling, who want a voice to represent their area. They would get in.
And something, it might even be helpful to the Tories, and I'll tell you why. Right now, the only way for far-right groups to be represented in Parliament is to take over the Tory party. And that's pretty much what the ERG group has done. If you look at the cabinet, well over half of them are ERG members. If you're in a proportional system, these people could stand for their own party, and maybe we'd end up with parties that where the middle position is better represented. Who knows? I want to ask you though about a different question, if I may. It's this: during the various services around the Queen's demise, several people popped up and suggested that the Prince Andrew wasn't a suitable person to be reintroduced into the body politic, and that they were concerned about the whole idea of monarchy. And these people were arrested and charged. Now, how does that fit, in your view, with freedom of speech?
Well, it doesn't. To be honest with you, I was rather embarrassed that this happened in this country, and around the same time that we were criticizing Putin and other places. But then Putin turns around on September 7th and says that the UK is not a democracy because of the way we chose our prime minister and our head of state, which he had a point at that point. I hate to say that, but when you look at freedoms, when you hold up a sign that says, an anti-monarchist sign, and you're charged with breach of the peace, that's almost a joke. And in Oxford, where the person said, not my king sign, and then the person who said to a police officer, who elected him when Charles goes by. And so when you look at the fact that these people were charged, even, is like it's an insult to our basic freedoms, and it's surprising that there wasn't more press on it. That this is where you get your columnists, your opinion people out there writing about this, because when I look at charters of rights and freedoms, and I'm going to go back to Canada here. They have their charter of rights. They have the charter of rights and freedoms, and the fundamental freedoms are words that you got freedom of conscience, you got freedom of religion. This is actually written in the Constitution. You have the freedom of conscience and consciousness. And religion and thought, beliefs, opinion and expression, and freedom of the press, freedom of other media, which is us in communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association, and basically, freedom of thought. And when you put in there, you have freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. That was what happened here. That they said you violated, and it was very. I wish there was more anger, and I realized that people probably thought that during the time of the Queen's death and funeral services and everything else that it was probably inappropriate. Perhaps that's their opinion, but I thought the bottom line is you do not bring in the law, you do not charge these people. The fact that they even moved that one woman away from the gate because she was anti-monarchist, but they moved her away. And you get 5 or 6 police officers pushing you away. Somebody told them to do that. That was not an initiative of a police officer. That is a policy. And that is, I use the word frightening. And, I use what Mary Black said in Parliament. She used the F word. She said it was fascist. Yeah.
Well, I've said that in my column in the Sunday National a number of times. And I said it again last Sunday, but I think you touched upon the core issue here, which is that Canada, unlike the UK, has a written constitution.
Yeah.
So when it comes to elementary freedoms, like the kind we've just been discussing, freedom of speech, anyone can go to the Constitution and say, this is my right, this is enshrined there, and you may not in any way violate that, because then you'd be acting unconstitutionally. We don't have that here. We have the very opposite. We have an unwritten constitution. In fact, as I've said on the programme before, you can sum up the UK constitution in one sentence. It is whatever the government of the day with a working majority says it is.
You're right.
And that means, for example, that institutions can be removed. The Scottish Parliament has no permanence, even though in 2014 a clear commitment was made to make the Scottish Parliament permanent. That has never been honoured. It couldn't be honoured because you can't have two sovereign entities in the same area. You can't claim that Westminster is sovereign and the next minute say, yeah, but this group over there is equally sovereign. And if it isn't sovereign, then it means it's not independent.
You can. And again, Australia and Canada, they've done that with their states. There are 6 states in Australia. They are strong entities of their own. They have their parliaments, they make their own laws in certain areas that are not anything to do with the National Criminal Code. No, it takes Parliament. But when you make a change to the Constitution, taking Canada, for example, you need 7 of the 10 provinces that also make up the majority. It's a very complicated system again, but it works. And you also have brought into that Constitution, when they have these very frequent constitutional conferences, the premiers, the Indigenous people, labor, all the factors involved, businesses there. It's a compact of thought, and it is a confederation that works.
Well, I would suggest that it works, at least in large part, based on checks and balances, the way all good constitutions work. Solid states don't mind checks and balances. Transient states, emergent countries, don't have the checks and balances, which is why they need to arrive at that place. The UK has never had the checks and balances that are enjoyed in Canada or Australia, for that matter. Institutions can be abolished. The government of the day can say, we're going to produce a Bill of Rights. We don't have to consult with you, Ian Kinsey. We don't want to consult with you, John Drummond. We don't want to consult with Nicola Sturgeon. We'll just announce it tomorrow morning. And happily, we have Lord Rees-Mogg to help us do that. But that's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. And my concern, I think you're sharing it, is that if a fundamental freedom or right is freedom of expression, then what happened over the last few weeks is very alarming, because it does rather suggest that the authorities feel that they're not beholden to the people.
Yeah. It's frightening. We mentioned 1984 a lot when we're referring to this, and I think what you're seeing is they would love to get rid of Holyrood, and everything comes through the Westminster Parliament. Mm-hmm. They're probably weighing how much of an uproar would that be. There's 5.4 million of the 50 odd million down there. And the number of the 59 MPs based on the 630 odd that are in Westminster, it's a spit in the bucket. So there is a fright. There is a concern there. Holyrood is not safe. Neither is the Welsh Parliament, or whenever they get their act together in Northern Ireland. That's not safe either, because you lose if you're of the Rees-Mogg, Liz Truss, that group, you lose a bit of your power, you lose a bit of your influence, and you can't change the rules, some of the rules of electioneering and what have you. And I think that it's very dangerous. We're into a very unsettling period right now, and this is where the journalism of the citizen journalism, the time going back to the time of the Thomas Paine and what have you, and people writing pamphlets back in the 1600s and 1500s. This is what we're doing now. This is a whole new era for citizen journalism, and it's a good area. It could be our enlightenment if we do it right. If we communicate like we're communicating with each other, if other citizen journalists, we all got together somehow. We don't, form a group together, but what I'm saying is we communicate more with each other, and we share, and we don't try to. We're we're not for profit. We'd like to have some money, but we're not beholden
Yeah.
to we don't take advertisements. We don't take political. We don't go to the government and say we need
Yeah.
money here. We're on our own,
Yeah.
and we finance ourselves. So therefore, there is no influence of any kind.
Yeah.
And
That's good. I want to take another question if I can, Ian, because we've only got 15 minutes left. Ashbury Stumble is asking, with Ian's connections to Bylines in Yorkshire and elsewhere, does he think that federalism has any traction in these areas? Because you talked about a federal system. You applauded the Canadian system, which is a federation or a confederation.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any appetite for federalism elsewhere?
I get people in Yorkshire saying, why can't I have a vote too for what if Scotland has a vote for separation? Why can't I have a vote for separation? I think that's all amounts up to frustration, and Scotland is a distinct nation. I believe it could go on its own. I believe that they would get, if it legally separated, I think that it would be a very, you'd get a lot of support from Europe, the Nordic countries. You get support from the United States faster than what Liz Truss is going to get. I think it's serious because there's a diaspora out there of Scots who would say, they're not going to come flooding here, but they're going to come here. Especially, I know the Scots in Canada, out Cape Breton and Nova Scotia, they're very strong towards their mother country. They don't mean United Kingdom, they mean Scotland.
Yeah.
But I think there'd be that kind of support. But also for federalism, you could have Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales. I don't know what Northern Ireland is going to do with Ireland. They should have a border poll. Yeah, we have the right to have these border polls and referendums because if we do separate, that doesn't mean we lose. We don't have to have this animosity anymore. Look at what happened when Czechoslovakia broke up. That was the Velvet Revolution. They basically sat down one day, the two leaders, and said, "No, this isn't working, is it? No, the Russians have gone, and we're no longer, under that Moscow rule. Here it is, and in 1991, let's separate, but the border stayed open. People moved back and forth, money moved back and forth. Everything was fine. They just eventually they had separate parliaments." But they didn't run around and change the currency and do everything else. And there was no concern about it because they were two distinct societies. And I think that's a model to look at. Canada's a model. There's other models around that, you don't want to use the Romanian one, but at the same time, you got, like in Czechoslovakia, it was nonviolent. And this could be nonviolent. Could be nonviolent here. There'd be sort of, we don't have to close the border. We can still trade. We can still go back and forth like what Ireland and Northern Ireland have. But you get, people want to put barriers and put the walls and what have you. They want to put, we got to do all these, custom checks and stuff like that. We can keep things going, but we're separate and we make our own rules, our own laws, our own regulations. I see nothing wrong. That could be a velvet revolution here. But you got to have good people in power, good thinkers, and that's the problem. Is we don't have that right now. We have that. Maybe I think that what's Mark Drakeford is a nice guy in Wales, and I think that Sinn Féin, they won it. They should be sitting there. They're never going to get that with the DUP. But at the same time, here we could sit as an independent parliament. We could have everything, and we could be a separate, but within a sort of an unwritten,
you could
Full constitution.
maybe Scandinavia is a model, and Sweden and Denmark, all with very different approaches. I mean, the Danes, Norwegians believe in military action when required. The Swedes just don't. They believe in neutrality. Very different value system, but all working together when it comes to running their own airline. They don't call it Danish Airlines. They don't call it Norwegian. They call it SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, and stuff like that. A question, if I may, from Patricia Clint. She's saying, we seem to be moving to more and more oppressive policies. I'm very afraid for the future. Please, people with knowledge, what can we do? And I think she's put you in very firmly in the category of people with knowledge. Ian. So, as somebody with, what can we do, would you say?
I really hate to disappoint Patricia Clint, but I have a certain amount of knowledge because I've been beyond the borders. I've seen other countries. I've lived and worked in the U.S., Europe, Canada, England, Scotland, and I've some places I like to forget. But at the same time, I think that I've sucked in those societies and what have you, and learned something from them, and understood some of them. And when you go from living in Texas and jumping over to Vienna, it's sort of it's a big it's a culture shock.
Yeah.
But I think that people with knowledge, you have to listen to multiple voices these days. I don't think you're going to. Out of the blue comes a Nelson Mandela. Out of the blue comes a Martin Luther King or somebody of strong voice. I think that you have to listen to different voices, and you have to bring them together, and you have to don't jump in and believe everything. I don't believe. I cannot believe how people can think by looking at the side of a bus to save $350 million, and it's going to go to the NHS. How the hell? And you wonder about. That's what I'm frightened of, is the people who believe that.
Yeah.
And when I don't know, the Joseph Goebbels propaganda machine is an example of that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you had the people who have very good ideas and creative ideas. You need to listen to them, and you need to follow them. You need to encourage them, and that's it. And you also need to encourage what we're doing. And Patricia, if she has an article she wants to write, hey, it's editor at Bylines.Scot, and I only 2 articles that I've rejected so far. All the rest have come in. Yes, we've helped with the editing. I agree with that, but nothing is ever published without that author's consent.
Yeah.
They own the copyright all the way through. And we check it, we fact check it, we do everything we can, and that you check for plagiarism, the whole bit. And we go back to the first thing. Okay, it's nice of you to take these 10 paragraphs from Wikipedia, but do that. But we educate as well as
Now, these people like Patricia, who may or may not take up that very kind invitation, would she be paid?
Well, we don't pay.
You don't pay. Okay.
No, we don't pay. All the writers, and they're by the way, at last count there were 32, and okay, a third of those are prolific.
Mm-hmm.
Others have contributed, and they're building, they're growing, they're getting confidence in that. I have professors, I have people who are working in hotels, in the down in the laundry, and who have very good ideas. But at the same time, no, we don't pay because we can't afford it. Okay,
that's okay. That's okay.
But people write to us, and they write their articles because of one thing.
Yeah, well,
they want to get the word out there. They want to get their voice, and they love writing.
Yeah, well, it's like us here on the TNT show. I don't get paid. Kevin doesn't get paid. We do this because we think it's important, and we think there should be a diverse media. So I wholly support what you do. And the other thing too is that if people genuinely feel that their voice isn't being heard, I mean, Patricia is saying, how do we deal with this? That's one way to do it. They can write to you, and if the stuff is good, then you'll consider its publication. I think that's perfect, because it seems to me, because people often complain about the mass media, and here you are providing an opportunity for people to voices to be heard in a way that the mass media just would not do.
And we're not the only outlet for that. There are other excellent citizen journalism, journalistic concepts throughout even small ones, large ones. There's broadcast media, and there's that people need to look at and they need to go to. They can't just sit there and turn on Google News and accept it as a truth. It is, and it's sensationalism or go down. We've had our critics, of course. The worst insult I ever had was somebody called me a Daily Mail North, and that really upset me for about an hour. But I had to calm down, John. So anyway, I think that people need to look at alternative media. They need to look at, I remember the days when Al Jazeera was a boogaboo. You went and looked at that back in the year 2000. But now, hey, they got an excellent sports section, John. But they also have excellent business reporting, and you look at balanced reporting, and you need to look at that electronically. We're not the end all, and neither is yourself or anybody else. But people need to look at alternative journalism. They need to look at the citizen journalism, because we don't have an axe to grind. What we have is a voice that we're trying to get out, and I'm trying to get as many voices up there as I can.
Well, you've already succeeded, because Patricia has come back and said, she said, I might do that, thanks. No pay, thanks. Love is enough. There you are.
Okay, that
was the last time somebody said that to you.
Patricia, I'm going to look forward to that. You send it through, and I'll look for your name.
There you are. And in the same way, if you want to support Bylines Scotland, then there's a means of doing that on the webpage, which was on the screen earlier.
And all the money stays in Scotland, by the way. It doesn't go down.
Cool. That's cool. See, we're almost out of time. Is there anything in a sentence or two that you feel we ought to have said and covered tonight that we didn't?
I think what bottom line, John, I think we talked a lot, and I think that bottom line is you need to listen to all the alternative opinions on both sides of the fence. Yeah. If you are a strong federalist, unionist, you do have to listen to what some of the people on the Indian side are saying, and vice versa. You can't have that wall between. It's dialogue, and dialogue is the most important thing.
Can I offer an invitation then? If you have any of your citizen journalists would like to come on the show, who perhaps do not represent an independence perspective and have other views on constitutional change, we'd be more than happy to consider them, because we're looking across the range of people. So just a thought.
Well, I know it's a good thought, and I'll pass that on to everybody.
Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, we have to close, I'm afraid. Ian, thank you very much for being our guest tonight. It's been educational.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me, John.
Terrific. I hope you can stay on the line for a little bit longer once we go off air. Let me just say a few concluding remarks, if I may. Again, thank you to Ian, and thank you to all of you for joining us. And a big thanks. I hope you enjoyed the show. As ever, we've got some formidable guests lined up for future shows. You'll find all the details on the website. The TNT Show is back next Wednesday, September the 21st, at the same time. And we will be joined by the Reverend Frank Ribbon from Inverness. and I can guarantee you he has lots of interesting comments to make. As always, a reminder, please to look out for Dr. Elliot Bulmer's column in the Sunday National this weekend. You'll find it in the 7 Days supplement. So in closing, I just want to repeat my offer to James Cook and everyone at the BBC to come on the show. That offer is still on the table, gentlemen, ladies. And again, you might like to challenge Emily Maitlis's view that a Tory decides all BBC output, including yours. So as a self-respecting journalist, I'm sure you would like to set the record straight. Please don't hide away in Pacific Key. Makes you look terribly weak. Come out, face your audience. We'll give you a full hour to state your position and defend your position. We'd love to have you on the show. Please give us a call. We're more than happy to have you there. Please, again, look out for the crowdfunder, Help Indie Live, to keep broadcasting, to keep providing shows like this. And to all of you, thanks for joining us tonight. Stay safe and take care of each other. Good night. See you next week.
Good night, John.